The winter of 1882 descended upon Iron Ridge, Wyoming Territory, with the weight of a judgment. It was a season that did not merely arrive, it conquered. The wind was a living thing, a razor-edged spirit that screamed through the valley, stripping the heat from the thickest wool coats and turning the marrow of men's bones to ice. Main Street, usually an artery of mud and commerce, lay frozen and desolate under a sky the color of bruised slate. From the jagged warmth of the Gilded Horn Saloon, the familiar discordant symphony of a Saturday afternoon spilled out. The tinny, desperate notes of a piano that hadn't seen a tuner in a decade, the sharp clink of cheap glass, and the low, guttural roar of men trying to drown the cold in amber whiskey. But on this particular December day, a different sound tore through the air, drawing the townsfolk from their hearths like moths to a dying flame. It was the voice of Thaddeus Thorne. "Get out here, you useless burden!" Thaddeus stumbled through the swinging doors, the wood groaning under his erratic weight. He dragged a figure behind him, his grip on her wrist bruisingly tight. It was his daughter, Elara. At 19, Elara Thorne possessed a haunting beauty that the town chose to ignore. Dark hair like a raven's wing, eyes the color of storm clouds, and a face etched with a premature weariness. She should have been a wife, a mother, a part of the community. Instead, she was the town's ghost. Elara had been born into a world of silence. A fever in her infancy had stolen her hearing, and, with it, her father's affection. Thaddeus saw her deafness not as a tragedy, but as a personal insult, a defect that fermented his grief over his wife's death into a toxic, violent shame. "Come on!" Thaddeus bellowed, his voice cracking like a bullwhip. He spun her around, causing her to slip on the icy mud. Elara wore only a thin gray calico dress. Her winter shawl had been bartered for a bottle of rye 3 days prior. She did not cry out. She had learned long ago that sound was a weapon used by others, and that silence was her only shield. "She's broken!" Thaddeus shouted to the gathering crowd, swaying dangerously. The stench of rot-gut whiskey radiated from him, visible in the steam of his breath. "Deaf as a stump, can't hear a damn thing, can't speak right neither." Windows along Main Street slide open. Shopkeepers stepped onto their porches, wiping their hands on aprons. In Iron Ridge, where the winter was long and entertainment scarce, public cruelty was a spectator sport. Mrs. Beatrice Higgins, the parson's wife, clutched her woolen collar tight, whispering to her neighbor, "That poor girl. It's a sin, it is." But she did not step off the boardwalk. No one did. 19 years I've fed this mouth," Thaddeus ranted, spittle freezing on his beard. 19 years of bad luck. Her mother died pushing her out, and for what? For a mute invalid. He shook Elara's arm, treating her like a rag doll. Elara kept her eyes fixed on the frozen ruts of the road. She could feel the vibrations of his shouting through the ground, through the grip on her arm. She didn't need to hear the words to understand the scene. She felt the weight of the town's gaze, the mixture of pity, disgust, and relief that they were not her. "So, I'm done," Thaddeus announced, spreading his free arm theatrically. "I'm giving her away, free to the first man who'll drag her off." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. It was a dark joke, surely. "She can cook," Thaddeus slurred. "Clean's good enough, and she can't talk back. That's a prize, ain't it?" The laughter grew louder, uglier. A young man, Julian Vane, the son of the wealthy banker, smirked from the edge of the crowd, nudging his companion. "Imagine that!" Julian sneered. "A woman who can't nag." "Come on!" Thaddeus roared, panic edging into his voice now. The liquor was wearing off, replaced by the cold reality of his debts. "I'll throw in $5. $5 to whoever takes this millstone off my neck." He fumbled in his vest, producing a crumpled, greasy bill. He waved it in the air. $5! The crowd shifted. Selling a daughter was a bridge too far, even for Iron Ridge. It violated the unspoken code of the frontier. Yet, the inaction remained. Elara's fingers twitched at her side, tracing the shapes of signs she had learned from a hidden book years ago. A book her father had burned when he found it. "Help me," she signed against her skirt, a prayer to a god she wasn't sure was watching. "Nobody?" Thaddeus sounded genuinely hurt. "She's young, strong. Look at her." He jerked her chin up, forcing her to face the crowd. Elara's eyes were dry, burning with a cold fire. She scanned the faces of people she had washed laundry for, people whose floors she had scrubbed. They looked away. "Thaddeus, go home," an old miner called out. "You're drunk." "Home?" Thaddeus laughed, a desolate cracking sound. "I got no home. Landlord's kicking us out tomorrow. I can't feed her no more. Please, somebody." Sheriff Amos Tate, a man whose spine had bowed under the weight of his badge, finally stepped off the sidewalk. "All right, Thad, that's enough. Let the girl go." But before the sheriff could reach them, the atmosphere in the street shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a sudden, heavy silence that swallowed the wind. A rider was coming. He emerged from the veil of swirling snow, like a phantom from a folklore tale. He was immense, his broad shoulders encased in a heavy buffalo hide coat that had seen decades of storms. His hair, black as obsidian and streaked with early gray, hung past his shoulders. He rode a painted horse, black and white, that stepped with high, wary grace. He was Apache. The realization rippled through the crowd. In 1882, the wars were largely over, but the hatred remained, a scar across the territory. Yet, this man wore cavalry boots and trousers beneath his native coat. He moved with a fluidity that suggested he could walk through dry leaves without breaking a twig. The crowd parted. This was primal instinct. You do not block the path of a predator. The rider halted 10 feet from Thaddeus. He looked down, his face a map of scars and stories that civilized men did not want to read. His eyes, dark and unyielding, took in the scene. The swaying drunk, the shivering girl, the crumpled $5 bill. "I know you can hear." The voice was deep, resonant, like stones grinding together deep underground. It wasn't directed at Thaddeus. The stranger was looking directly at Elara. Elara's head snapped up. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't looking at her ears or her mouth, but at her. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the alertness in her posture. Thaddeus blinked, confusing overriding his drunkenness. Who the hell are you?" The stranger's gaze slid to Thaddeus, heavy and dismissive. "Name is Elias. Some call me Wolf." "Well, Wolf," Thaddeus stammered, trying to muster authority. "This is family business. You best ride on." "You offered her to anyone," Elias said. His English was precise, educated, with a cadence that commanded attention. "I am anyone." "He's that scout," a whisper ran through the crowd. "Lives up on Black Peak, served with the 7th. Elias ignored them. He extended a hand, palm up. It was a massive hand, scarred and calloused. "You named a price." "You can't," Thaddeus started, but greed was a powerful narcotic. $5? Elias reached into his coat and produced a leather pouch. He didn't count out bills. He poured silver dollars into his palm. The heavy, melodious clink of silver cut through the wind. 10 coins. 10, Elias said, for the insult. Insult? No woman should be sold, but if silver buys her freedom... Elias let the sentence hang. Thaddeus lunged for the money, the shame of the moment eclipsed by the shine of the coins. "Done! She's yours, Apache. Take her and be damned." He shoved Elara forward. Elara stumbled, but Elias leaned down from his saddle, his movement impossibly fast. He caught her arm. His grip wasn't painful. It was an anchor. Up close she smelled wood smoke, leather, and sage. "Sheriff!" It was Julian Vane, stepping forward with a sneer. "You gonna let a savage walk off with a white woman? It ain't decent." Elias turned his head slowly. "More decent than leaving her to freeze while you laugh, boy." Sheriff Tate sighed, looking at the silver in Thaddeus's hand. "Law says a father has rights, Julian. Transaction was made." Elias looked at Elara. He lifted his hands, and to the shock of the town, he began to sign. His movements were crisp, a blend of military signals and plain sign language. "My horse. Can you ride?" Elara's breath hitched. A sob trapped in her chest finally broke free, silent and racking. He spoke her language. A little, she signed back, her hands trembling. Elias nodded. He swung his foot out of the stirrup and pulled her up. She settled in front of him, sideways, and he unbuttoned his massive buffalo coat, wrapping the excess around her shivering frame. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of safety. "This ain't over," Julian shouted as Elias turned the horse. Elias didn't look back. He clicked his tongue, and the painted horse broke into a trot. carrying them away from the malice of Iron Ridge and into the white embrace of the mountains. The journey up Black Peak took hours. The world narrowed down to the rhythmic crunch of hooves on snow and the steady heartbeat against Elara's back. She should have been terrified. She was alone in the wilderness with a man her people called a savage. But for the first time in years, the knot of anxiety in her stomach uncoiled. They arrived at a cabin nestled against a granite cliff face. It was not the hovel she expected. It was built of sturdy logs, chinked tight against the wind, with a stone chimney breathing gray smoke into the twilight. Elias helped her down. His legs were stiff, but he moved with purpose. "Inside," he signed, "warm." The interior was a revelation. It was clean, ordered, and filled with books. Shelves lined the walls, packed with leather-bound volumes. There were tools, traps, and hanging herbs. But what caught Elara's eye were the carvings. Small, intricate wooden figures of wolves, bears, and birds occupied every flat surface. They were breathtakingly lifelike. Elias lit an oil lamp, bathing the room in gold. He gestured to a chair by the stove. "Sit, I make tea." He moved with domestic efficiency, filling a kettle, stoking the fire. Elara watched him, wrapped in his coat. He wasn't the monster the stories depicted. He was a man who lived in a solitude so deep it had become a physical weight. He handed her a mug of steaming pine needle tea in a delicate china cup that looked absurd in his large hands. Then he went to a trunk and pulled out a dress, thick blue wool, and a soft shawl. "My sister's," he signed. "She is gone now. Please, wear." Elara changed behind a blanket partition. The wool was scratchy but warm. When she emerged, Elias was sitting by the fire, whittling a piece of cedar. "Why?" she signed, sitting opposite him. "Why help me?" Elias stopped carving. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the flames. "I know what it is to be looked at but not seen, to be judged for what you are, not who you are." "You speak sign?" she motioned. "Army," he signed, "and trade. Words are not always spoken." Over the next few weeks, the cabin became a sanctuary. A routine formed. Elias taught her how to check snares, how to cure hides, and how to read the tracks in the snow. In the evenings, he read to her Shakespeare, Emerson, poetry, his finger tracing the lines so she could follow, while he signed the meaning. She learned that he was a citizen, a veteran who had scouted for the army, hoping to buy respect for his people, only to find that betrayal was the only currency the government paid in. He had retreated to this mountain, buying the land with his army pay, choosing isolation over indignity. One evening, while mending a shirt, Elara found a small broken bird he had carved. Its wing was snapped. "Broken," she signed. Elias took it gently. "Not broken," he signed back. "Healing. Even broken things can fly if given time." He looked at her then, and the air in the cabin grew thin. The connection between them was forging into something stronger than gratitude. It was a recognition of shared scars. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. His hand lingered. Elara leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed. In the silence of the mountain, she finally heard the sound of her own heart. Winter deepened, but supplies dwindled. 2 months after her rescue, necessity forced them back to Iron Ridge. Elara dreaded it, but Elias was pragmatic. "We trade, we leave, we owe them nothing." They rode into town on a Tuesday. The reaction was immediate. Conversations died, people stared, but this time, Elara didn't shrink. She wore the blue wool dress, her hair braided with leather strips in the Apache style. She sat tall. They entered the general store. The shopkeeper, Mr. Henderson, turned pale. "We need flour, coffee, and salt," Elias said, his voice filling the room. Mrs. Higgins was there, inspecting fabric. She gasped. "Elara, is that you?" Elara turned. She saw the judgment in Mrs. Higgins' eyes, but also a flicker of curiosity. "She looks healthy," another woman whispered. "Do you think, is she with child?" The rumor ignited instantly. The deaf girl is pregnant with the savage's child. It whispered through the aisles like a draft. Julian Vane entered the store, followed by his cronies. He had been waiting for this. "Well, look at this." Julian sneered, blocking the exit. The happy couple returns. You got some nerve bringing her back here, Wolf. Elias didn't look up from the counter where he was counting out coins. Step aside, Julian. Or what? Julian stepped closer. I hear she's carrying your bastard. That true, Elara? You let him defile you? Elara felt the vibration of his shouting. She saw the ugly shape of his mouth. Rage, hot and unfamiliar, surged in her chest. She stepped in front of Elias. I can hear you, she said. Her voice was rusty, guttural but loud. The store went dead silent. Julian blinked. You... I can hear your hate, Elara continued, her enunciation improving with every word. I have always heard it. You call him a savage. He treats me with honor. He teaches me. He listens. She pointed a trembling finger at the townspeople. You watched my father starve me. You watched him beat me, and you did nothing. You are the savages. Julian's face turned crimson. You watch your mouth, you little... He raised a hand. Elias moved. It was a blur of motion. He caught Julian's wrist midair and twisted. Julian screamed, dropping to his knees. Touch her, Elias whispered, and you lose the hand. He shoved Julian away. We are done here. They walked out, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. But as they mounted the horse, Thaddeus Thorne stumbled out of an alley. He looked like a corpse warmed over, skin yellow, eyes wild. Elara! He wailed. My girl! Come back! He's bewitched you! Elara looked down at the man who had given her life, and then tried to sell it. Goodbye, Thaddeus, she said softly. She wrapped her arms around Elias's waist. Take us home. The retribution came 3 nights later. It was a moonless night. Elara woke to Elias's hand over her mouth. Quiet, he signed. Riders. She sat up, heart hammering. Through the window, she saw torches weaving through the tree line. A mob. Get the rifle, Elias signed. He stood by the door, a Winchester in his hand, his face a mask of calm violence. Elara, stay down. Come out, Wolf. It was Julian's voice. We know you're in there. Send the girl out and we'll only burn the cabin. There were at least 20 of them, drunk on whiskey and righteousness. Elias looked at Elara. Too many, he signed. I will hold them. You run out the back. No, she signed furiously. Together. She grabbed a heavy clay pot from the shelf, one filled with flammable pine resin and oil Elias used for waterproofing. She shoved a rag into it and lit it from the stove. Open the door, she signaled. Elias hesitated, then kicked the door open. Elara stepped onto the porch, the flaming pot in her hand, casting long, dancing shadows. She looked wild, her hair loose, her eyes blazing. You want me? She screamed. Come take me. The horses shied. The men hesitated. They expected a victim. They found a fury. She's a witch, someone shouted. Look at her. Elara began to sign, large, sweeping, aggressive gestures. To the men, it looked like spellcasting. In reality, she was signing, You are cowards. You are weak. Fire will take you all. She hurled the pot. It smashed against a rock in front of the lead horses, exploding in a ball of blue-orange fire. The horses panicked. Julian's mount reared, throwing him into the snow. Apache magic, a rider yelled. Elias stepped out then, leveling his rifle. He didn't fire. He just stood there, the embodiment of death waiting to be invited in. Leave, Elias said, or stay and bleed. Decide. The superstition, the fire, and the terrifying calm of the Apache scout broke them. The mob turned, dragging a cursing Julian with them, and fled into the darkness. Peace returned, but it was fragile. Spring was coming, melting the snow, and with the thaw came the final test. Sheriff Tate rode up a week later. He wasn't alone. A carriage followed him, a sleek black vehicle that looked utterly out of place in the mountains. Elias watched them from the porch, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Elara stood beside him, gripping his arm. The sheriff dismounted, looking tired. Morning, Elias, Elara. 2 women stepped out of the carriage. They were dressed in expensive black silk, their faces pinched and severe. Martha, the older woman said, using Elara's birth name. Good heavens, look at you. "Who are they?" Elara asked, her voice steady. "This is your grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, and your aunt," the sheriff explained. "From Boston." Elara stared. "Boston? Your father died last night," the sheriff said gently. "Liver gave out. Before he passed, he confessed. Your mother's family has been sending money for your care for 19 years. Thaddeus drank it all. He told them you were dead, then that you were feeble-minded." Margaret stepped forward, holding a handkerchief to her nose. "We have come to rectify this dreadful situation. We are taking you home, Martha. You will have doctors, tutors, a proper life." She looked at Elias with undisguised revulsion. "Away from this filth." The offer hung in the air. Wealth, comfort, a world where she wouldn't have to scrape hides to survive. Elias stepped back. He looked at Elara, his face unreadable, but his eyes full of pain. "Go," he signed small against his chest. "Better life. You deserve." Elara looked at the carriage, then at her grandmother, a woman who shared her blood but had never shared her suffering. Then she looked at Elias. She saw the man who had spent his last $10 to save her, the man who had taught her that her voice mattered, the man who had carved a broken bird and told her it could fly. She turned to Margaret. "My name is Elara." "Martha, don't be difficult," the aunt snapped. "We are leaving." "You left me for 19 years, Elara said. "You sent checks. You didn't send love." "We didn't know," Margaret protested. "You didn't check," Elara countered. She stepped back, interlacing her fingers with Elias's. "This is my home. This is my family." "He is a savage," Margaret shrieked. "He is a king compared to the men you know," Elara said. "Sheriff, escort them off our land." Sheriff Tate smiled, a genuine, weary smile. "You heard the lady, Mrs. Whitmore. Jurisdiction ends at the property line. Time to go." As the carriage rattled away, angry and defeated, silence reclaimed the mountain. But it wasn't the lonely silence of winter. It was the peaceful silence of belonging. Elias turned to her, his stoicism cracking. "You could have had everything." Elara reached up, cupping his scarred cheek. "I have everything," she signed. "And the rumors?" Elias asked aloud. "About the children?" Elara smiled, pulling him toward the warmth of the cabin. "Let them talk," she said. "One day, perhaps, we will give them something real to talk about. But for now, we have work to do." They entered the cabin, closing the door against the world. Outside, the spring sun touched the snow, turning the white peaks into gold. They were outcasts, yes. But on this mountain, they were free, and that was worth more than all the silver in the world. Thank you for reading this tale of resilience and love on the frontier. If Elara's choice moved you, or if you think Elias was the hero she deserved, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Questions for you. Would you have chosen the comfort of Boston or the freedom of the mountains? Do you think the town of Iron Ridge ever truly learned its lesson? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the Wild West.